I never expected that helping my best friend through the darkest period of his life would completely change mine. If you'd asked me 2 years ago whether I'd ever fall in love with Martin, I would have laughed and told you that was impossible. Not because he wasn't attractive. Trust me, he was. Martin was the kind of guy people naturally gravitated toward. Tall, athletic, dark blonde hair that somehow always looked perfect without trying, and a smile that could make almost anyone feel comfortable. Girls loved him. Guys wanted to be friends with him. And me, I was Victor, his best friend since we were 14. For nearly 10 years, we were inseparable. The funny thing is that when you've known someone that long, you stop seeing them the way everyone else does. They become part of your everyday life, like breathing. Martin wasn't the handsome guy. He was the idiot who forgot his wallet everywhere. The guy who texted me memes at 3 in the morning. The friend who once drove 40 minutes just because my car broke down after work. He was family. At least, that's what I thought. The first sign that something was wrong came on a rainy Tuesday. Martin didn't answer my messages. Normally that wouldn't sound strange, but Martin always answered, even if it was hours later, even if it was just a thumbs up, something. Instead, my messages sat unread all day. Then another day passed, and another. By Friday, I was worried enough to drive to his apartment after work. When he finally opened the door, I barely recognized him. His hair was messy. His eyes looked exhausted. There was stubble covering his jaw, and behind him the apartment looked like a disaster zone. Empty takeout containers, dirty dishes, curtains closed, no lights on despite it being evening. For several seconds, neither of us said anything. Then Martin forced a smile. "Hey." The smile lasted maybe half a second. I immediately knew something was seriously wrong. "What happened?" I asked. He shrugged. "Nothing." "That's bullshit." Another shrug. His eyes dropped to the floor. That scared me more than anything. Martin was confident, not arrogant, but confident. Seeing him unable to meet my eyes felt wrong, like watching a building slowly collapse. Finally, he stepped aside. "You coming in?" I walked inside. The apartment smelled stale, like nobody had opened a window in weeks. Martin sat on the couch. I sat beside him. For almost a minute, he said nothing. Then quietly, he said, "I got fired." I blinked. "What?" "3 weeks ago." "3 weeks?" He nodded. "You didn't tell me." "I know." I stared at him. Martin had worked at the same company for nearly 5 years. He loved that job. Loved it. The project he'd been managing got cancelled. Management cut staff. Martin got caught in the layoffs. It wasn't his fault, but he blamed himself anyway. That's the thing nobody tells you about depression. It doesn't care about facts. It takes every fear you already have and turns the volume all the way up. For Martin, it convinced him he was a failure, that he wasn't good enough, that everyone would eventually realize he wasn't worth keeping around, including me, especially me. Over the next hour, everything came pouring out. The lost job, the mounting bills, the anxiety, the sleepless nights, the constant feeling that he was drowning. And the worst part, he'd been dealing with it completely alone. "I didn't want people to know," he admitted. "Why?" He laughed bitterly. "Because everybody expects me to have my shit together." "Nobody expects that." "They do." "No, they don't." He rubbed his eyes. "You do." That one hurt, because he genuinely believed it. I leaned forward. "Martin." He looked at me. "You've spent almost 10 years helping me through every stupid thing I've ever done." A tiny smile appeared. "There were a lot of stupid things." "Exactly." I pointed at him. "So don't sit there and act like you're suddenly alone." His expression cracked. Not dramatically. Not like in movies. Just enough. I saw tears forming. Martin quickly looked away. That scared me too, because I'd only seen him cry once before. At his grandfather's funeral. Hey, I said quietly. He stayed silent. You don't have to do this by yourself. For a moment, I thought he might argue. Instead, he whispered, I'm tired, Victor. 3 simple words, but I'd never heard anyone sound so defeated. Not tired physically, tired emotionally. The kind of exhaustion that settles deep inside someone's bones. I didn't know exactly what to say, so I told him the truth. Then let me help. The apartment was silent. Rain tapped softly against the windows. Finally, Martin nodded. Just once, and that was the beginning. At first, helping him seemed simple. I checked on him every day, made sure he ate, dragged him outside when he wanted to stay in bed, helped update his resume, sent him job listings. Sometimes we talked, sometimes we just sat together in silence. But little by little, I started spending more time at his apartment, then entire weekends, then most evenings. Because whenever I left, I worried about him, and whenever I was there, he seemed a little better. One night, about a month later, we were sitting on his balcony watching the city lights. Neither of us had spoken for several minutes. Martin was holding a cup of coffee. I was scrolling aimlessly through my phone. Then he suddenly said, You know something. What? I probably wouldn't be here without you. I looked up. What does that mean? He stared into the distance. For a second I thought he might avoid answering. Instead he said, It got really bad before you showed up. My stomach tightened. How bad? He didn't answer immediately, and somehow that silence told me everything. A cold feeling spread through my chest. Martin. He finally looked at me. His eyes were sad, but honest. I didn't have a plan or anything. I exhaled, but I also didn't care if I woke up anymore. The world seemed to stop. I couldn't speak, couldn't think. All I knew was that the idea of losing him felt unbearable. And for the first time in my life, that feeling scared me more than anything. After that conversation, I couldn't stop thinking about what Martin had said. I didn't care if I woke up anymore. The words followed me everywhere, at work, at home, in the middle of the night when I couldn't sleep. I'd always known depression was serious, but hearing someone you love say something like that changes everything. At least back then, I still thought what I felt was simply friendship. A very strong friendship. Nothing more. I hadn't figured out the truth yet. The next few weeks became a routine. Every morning I'd text Martin. Every evening I'd call. And if he didn't answer within a few hours, I'd show up at his apartment. Eventually, he started expecting it. One afternoon, I walked in without knocking. Martin was sitting on the couch playing a video game. The sight alone felt like progress. A month earlier, he barely had the energy to get out of bed. Now he was yelling at digital opponents. You're cheating, I laughed. The game literally can't cheat. It absolutely can. You're losing to a 12-year-old. Shut up. For the first time in months, I saw a genuine smile, not a forced one, not something he put on for other people. A real smile, and something warm settled inside my chest. The strange thing was that helping him never felt like work. If anything, I started looking forward to seeing him. Too much, probably. Whenever my phone lit up with his name, my mood instantly improved. Whenever he canceled plans, I felt disappointed. Whenever he laughed, I caught myself smiling too. I ignored all of it. Because friends care about each other. That's what friends do, right? At least, that's what I kept telling myself. Then came the night that complicated everything. It was late October. A cold storm rolled through the city, the kind that turned streets into rivers. I was halfway home when my phone rang. Martin, I answered immediately. Hey. Silence. My stomach dropped. Martin? His voice finally came through, small, broken. Can you come over? I didn't even ask questions. I'm on my way. 20 minutes later, I was at his apartment. The second he opened the door, I knew something had happened. His eyes were red. His face looked pale. He was shaking. What happened? He stepped aside. I followed him inside. For several seconds, he just stood there. Then he held up his phone. An email, another job rejection. The seventh one that month. I read it quickly before handing it back. Martin, I don't understand, his voice cracked. I did everything right. I stayed quiet. I worked hard. I know. I got experience. I know. Then why does nobody want me? Hearing that hurt, because I knew he wasn't really asking about jobs anymore. Depression had convinced him he wasn't valuable. Every rejection became proof. Every setback became confirmation. And no matter how many times I told him otherwise, he struggled to believe it. He sat heavily on the couch. I sat beside him. Neither of us spoke. Eventually, he buried his face in his hands. I feel like I'm disappearing. Something inside me broke. Without thinking, I moved closer. I wrapped an arm around his shoulders. Martin froze. For a second, I worried I'd crossed a line. Then he leaned into me, and everything changed. Not dramatically, not obviously, just enough. His head rested against my shoulder. I could feel his breathing, feel the weight of him, trusting me, needing me. And suddenly I became painfully aware of how close we were. My heartbeat sped up. I hated myself for noticing. This wasn't about me. Martin was hurting. But no matter how hard I tried to ignore it, something felt different. For nearly 20 minutes, neither of us moved. The storm battered the windows. The room stayed dark except for a lamp in the corner. And somehow, sitting there with him, I realized something terrifying. The thought of losing Martin didn't hurt because he was my best friend. It hurt because I loved him. Actually loved him. Not hypothetically. Not someday. Right now. The realization hit me like a truck. I stared straight ahead, trying not to panic. Because once you know something like that, you can't unknow it. I loved him, and I had absolutely no idea what to do about it. The worst part, the timing couldn't have been worse. Martin was struggling to survive each day. The last thing he needed was me making things complicated. So I made a decision. I wouldn't tell him. Not now. Maybe not ever. If loving him meant helping him heal, then that's what I'd do. No expectations, no confessions, nothing. Just support. Just friendship. I convinced myself I could handle that. I was wrong. Very, very wrong. A few weeks later, Martin started improving, slowly but noticeably. He began exercising again, started cooking instead of ordering takeout, opened the curtains, cleaned the apartment. Little victories, but victories all the same. One Saturday morning, he called me unexpectedly. You busy? No. Good. Why? Get dressed. I frowned. What? We're going hiking. I almost laughed. You hate hiking? I know. So, why are we hiking? Because my therapist said I should do things I used to enjoy. That caught my attention. Martin had finally started therapy a month earlier. Convincing him hadn't been easy, but now he actually seemed committed, which made me happier than I could explain. An hour later, we were driving toward the mountains. For the first time in forever, Martin looked alive. The old Martin. Not completely, but pieces of him. Enough to remind me who he'd always been. The trail wasn't difficult. Mostly forest. Tall trees, cold air, fallen leaves covering the ground. For nearly 2 hours we walked and talked. Nothing serious. Movies, sports, random memories, normal things. And honestly, it felt incredible. Near sunset we reached an overlook. The city stretched across the horizon. Orange light painted everything gold. Martin stood beside me quietly. Then he smiled. A real smile, the kind I'd missed for months. You know, he said softly. What? This is the first day I've felt happy in a long time. My chest tightened. I looked at him, really looked at him. The wind pushed through his hair, the sunset reflected in his eyes, and for one reckless second, I wanted to tell him everything, how much he meant to me, how terrified I'd been, how deeply I loved him. The words sat right there, ready, but I swallowed them, because I wasn't ready, and neither was he. Instead, I smiled. "I'm glad you're here." Martin looked at me. Something unreadable flashed across his face, something warm, something intense. Then he nodded. "Yeah." His voice was quiet. "So am I. And for reasons I couldn't explain, my heart wouldn't stop racing." Winter arrived faster than either of us expected. By December, Martin had been unemployed for almost 4 months. But something had changed. Not everything. He still had bad days. Days when getting out of bed felt impossible. Days when his confidence disappeared completely. Days when he questioned whether he was making progress at all. But now those days didn't last as long. And most importantly, he wasn't facing them alone anymore. One Friday evening, I was sprawled across his couch while he cooked dinner. Or at least attempted to cook dinner. "That smells dangerous." Martin looked offended. "It smells amazing. It smells like a fire hazard." "You're exaggerating." The smoke detector chose that exact moment to start screaming. I burst out laughing. Martin groaned. "I hate you." "No, you don't." He pointed a spatula at me. "Get out. You invited me." Biggest mistake of my life. Despite his words, he was smiling. And seeing that smile still affected me more than it should have. The problem was that my feelings weren't getting weaker. They were getting worse. The more time we spent together, the harder it became to ignore them. Every casual touch, every laugh, every late-night conversation. Everything made me fall a little deeper. And I hated it, because I couldn't do anything about it. So I kept pretending. Pretending that my heart didn't speed up whenever he texted me. Pretending that I didn't think about him constantly. Pretending that I wasn't completely, hopelessly in love with my best friend. A few days before Christmas, Martin surprised me. I was helping him put together a new desk he'd bought online. Half the pieces were missing. The instructions looked like they had been translated through 6 different languages. We'd been arguing with it for nearly an hour. Then Martin suddenly said, "I got an interview." I froze. "What?" His smile immediately returned. "I got an interview." I practically tackled him. "No way." "Victor." I wrapped him in a hug anyway. He laughed. Actually laughed. The sound filled the apartment. For a few seconds, neither of us moved, and once again I became painfully aware of how natural it felt holding him. Too natural. Then he hugged me back. Tight. Firm. Longer than necessary. My heart nearly exploded. When we finally pulled apart, neither of us immediately looked away. Something strange passed between us. A moment. A feeling. Then it disappeared. And the spell broke. The interview was the following week. Martin was nervous. Terrified, actually. He called me the night before. "What if I screw it up?" "You won't." "What if I do?" "You won't." "What if—" "Martin." "Yeah?" "Go to sleep." "I can't." I laughed. "You're impossible." "I know." There was a pause. Then his voice softened. "Thanks for staying on the phone." That simple sentence hit harder than it should have. "Of course." Another pause. Neither of us hung up. Neither of us seemed to want to. Eventually, he said quietly, "I don't know what I'd do without you." My chest tightened, dangerously, because there was so much I wanted to say. Instead, I swallowed it all. "You're stuck with me." Martin laughed softly. "Good." The interview went well. Then another one followed. Then another. By January, Martin had multiple opportunities. Watching his confidence slowly return felt incredible. like watching sunlight break through clouds after a long storm. And maybe that's why what happened next caught me completely off guard. It was a Saturday night. Martin invited me to a small gathering at a friend's apartment. Nothing fancy, just food, drinks, and conversation. Normally, I would have gone without thinking, but lately I'd been avoiding situations where I had to watch Martin flirt with people. Self-preservation. Unfortunately, he refused to let me say no. So there I was, standing in a crowded apartment, holding a drink, pretending not to stare at him. Everything was fine until she arrived. Her name was Sophie, and she was beautiful. The kind of beautiful that made people turn around when she entered a room. Within minutes, she and Martin were talking, then laughing, then sitting together. And for some reason I couldn't explain, every second felt like torture. I hated myself for it. Martin wasn't mine. He never had been. He could date whoever he wanted. But logic didn't make the jealousy hurt less. After an hour, I finally escaped to the balcony. The cold air helped. A little. I stared out at the city lights, trying to get my head together, trying to remember that none of this was about me. The balcony door slid open. I already knew who it was. Martin stepped outside. "You disappeared." I shrugged. "Needed air." His eyes narrowed. "You okay?" "Yep." "You're a terrible liar." I laughed despite myself. Martin leaned against the railing beside me. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then he said, "You don't like Sophie." I nearly choked. "What? You don't like her?" "I barely know her." "Victor." I looked away. Martin studied me carefully. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled. Not a mocking smile, not amused. Something softer, something almost affectionate. "You're jealous." My heart stopped. Absolutely stopped. I stared at him, unable to breathe, unable to think. Martin looked equally surprised by his own words. The smile slowly faded. The air between us suddenly felt different, charged. Neither of us moved, neither of us spoke. For one impossible second, it felt like the entire world had gone silent. Then someone inside called Martin's name. The moment shattered instantly. He blinked, looked away, and stepped back toward the door. Forget I said that. Before I could answer, he disappeared inside, leaving me alone, with my pulse racing, and one terrifying question echoing through my head. Why had he sounded so disappointed when he thought I might be jealous of someone else? I didn't sleep much after that party. Actually, that's not true. I didn't sleep at all. Every time I closed my eyes, I kept replaying the moment on the balcony. "You're jealous." It wasn't what Martin said. It was how he said it. The look on his face afterward. The surprise. The hesitation. The strange tension that had appeared between us for those few seconds. I told myself I was imagining things, because the alternative was dangerous. The alternative was hope, and hope could destroy a friendship just as easily as it could save one. So I buried the thought. Or at least I tried to. A week later, Martin got the call. I was at work when my phone exploded with messages. "Martin, call me." "Martin, right now." "Martin, Victor." My heart immediately dropped. I thought something terrible had happened. I called him instantly. "Martin." Silence. Then, "I got it." I blinked. "What?" "I got the job." I nearly yelled loud enough for the entire office to hear. "No way." "Yes way." People were staring at me. I didn't care. Martin sounded happier than he had in months, maybe longer. For several seconds we were both laughing like idiots. And honestly, I couldn't remember the last time I'd felt that happy. Not for myself, for him. That evening we celebrated. Nothing fancy. Pizza, beer, movies, just us. The way it had always been. Or at least, that's what I kept telling myself. Around midnight, we were sitting on the floor surrounded by empty pizza boxes. Martin looked exhausted, but in a good way, the kind of exhaustion that comes after carrying a massive weight for too long. I think this is the first time I've felt excited about the future in months. I smiled. You should be. He looked at me. I almost gave up, you know. My smile faded. Martin noticed immediately. Not like that. I relaxed slightly. I just mean... He searched for the words. There was a point where I genuinely thought things would never get better. I stayed quiet. You never stopped believing they would. His voice was soft now, almost vulnerable. I looked down at my beer. I wasn't always confident. Really? No. Martin laughed. You hid it well. The truth was that there had been plenty of nights where I was terrified. Terrified I'd lose him. Terrified I wasn't helping enough. Terrified I'd say something stupid and push him away. But I never told him that. Instead, I shrugged. Somebody had to believe in you. Martin stared at me. Longer than normal. Then he quietly said, "Thank you." 3 simple words, but something about the way he said them made my chest ache, because it sounded like he meant much more than that. The following month was the best he'd had in nearly a year. The new job was going well, therapy was helping, his energy was coming back, and slowly the old Martin started reappearing, confident, funny, outgoing, the guy I'd known forever. I should have been happy. Instead, I found myself increasingly terrified because as he got better, he needed me less, and that realization hurt more than I expected. One Friday evening, he canceled our usual dinner plans. Not unusual, people have lives, but for some reason it bothered me. Then he canceled again the following week. Then again. Each time for perfectly reasonable reasons. Work, friends, family. Normal stuff. But every cancellation left me feeling strangely disappointed. Eventually, I had to admit something uncomfortable. I wasn't adjusting well. For months, my life had revolved around making sure Martin was okay. Now he was okay, and I didn't know where that left me. The realization hit hardest one rainy Thursday night. I was sitting alone in my apartment when my phone buzzed. A picture from Martin. He was at some bar with co-workers, laughing, smiling, looking genuinely happy. The photo should have made me happy. Instead, my chest hurt, because for the first time in months, he didn't need me there, and that terrified me. I hated myself for feeling that way. His recovery wasn't supposed to be about me. I wanted him healthy, wanted him happy. So why did I suddenly feel so lost? The answer arrived a few days later, and it came from Martin himself. We met for coffee on Sunday morning. Everything seemed normal at first, until he put down his cup and said, "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." He hesitated, which immediately made me nervous. "When was the last time you dated someone?" I nearly choked. "What?" He laughed. "Answer the question." I stared at him. "Why?" "Because I'm asking." I groaned. Martin folded his arms. "Victor," I sighed. "Almost 2 years." His eyebrows shot up. "Seriously?" "Yes." "Why?" I shrugged. "No idea." That was a lie. I knew exactly why. His name was Martin, but obviously I couldn't say that. Instead, I focused on my coffee. Martin stayed unusually quiet. Then he asked, "Have you liked anyone during that time?" Every muscle in my body froze. "Why are we talking about this?" "Just answer." I laughed nervously. "No." Another lie. A terrible one. Martin immediately noticed, because he'd known me for nearly 10 years, and nobody could read me like he could. His eyes narrowed. "You're lying." "No, I'm not." "Victor." I looked away. Martin suddenly became very interested in his coffee. Then, quietly, he said, "Who is he?" My heart stopped, completely stopped. For several seconds I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Did he know? Was he guessing? Had I somehow made it obvious? The silence stretched between us. Martin looked up, and for the first time all morning, he looked nervous too. I knew it. His voice was barely above a whisper. I stared at him. Neither of us moved. Neither of us looked away, and something huge shifted between us, something that had been building for months, maybe years. Neither of us knew what it was yet, but both of us felt it. The problem was that neither of us was brave enough to say it out loud. Not yet. The conversation should have ended there. It would have been easy. One of us could have changed the subject, made a joke, pretended nothing happened. That's what we'd always done whenever things became too real. Instead, neither of us moved. The coffee shop buzzed with conversations around us. People laughed. Music played softly through speakers. But at our table, everything felt strangely quiet. Martin was the first to look away. He rubbed the back of his neck, a nervous habit he'd had since high school. "Sorry," he said. "For what?" "I don't know." He laughed awkwardly. That was probably too personal. Relief and disappointment hit me at the same time, because part of me wanted him to drop it, and another part desperately wanted him to keep going. "It's fine," Martin nodded. But he didn't look convinced. For the rest of the morning, something felt different. Not bad, just different. Like we'd accidentally opened a door neither of us knew how to close. Over the next few weeks, I started noticing things. Little things. The way Martin looked at me when he thought I wasn't paying attention. The way his mood improved whenever I showed up. The way he always seemed disappointed when I left. Maybe those things had always existed. Maybe I was only seeing them now because I wanted to. I honestly didn't know, and that uncertainty was driving me insane. Then came the night everything almost changed. Martin invited me over after work. Nothing unusual. When I arrived, he was cooking dinner. Actual dinner. Not takeout. Not frozen pizza. Real food. I nearly applauded. "Look at you." "I know," he grinned. "I'm basically an adult now." "Let's not get carried away." He laughed. God, I'd missed hearing that laugh during the worst months. The thought hit me unexpectedly. There had been a time when I genuinely wasn't sure I'd hear it again, and suddenly I felt emotional for no reason. Martin noticed immediately. He always noticed. "You okay?" "Yeah." "Victor," I sighed. "It's nothing." He set down the knife he was holding. "It isn't nothing." I looked away. For a moment I considered lying. Then I decided not to. "I was just thinking about last year." His expression softened immediately. "Oh." The kitchen became quiet. Martin leaned against the counter. "I was a mess." "Yeah." He laughed weakly. "Yeah." Neither of us spoke for several seconds. Then he quietly said, "You know what's weird?" "What?" "I barely remember parts of it." I frowned. "What do you mean?" Everything felt blurry. His eyes drifted toward the window. "Like I was watching somebody else's life." That sounded heartbreaking. Martin continued, "I remember feeling hopeless." His voice remained calm, almost detached. "But I don't remember most days." I listened carefully. "Therapist says that's normal." "Maybe." He smiled faintly. "Apparently my brain was just trying to survive." Something about that hurt, because I'd witnessed it all. The exhaustion, the emptiness, the self-doubt. Seeing him talk about it now felt surreal, like discussing a storm after it had passed. Then Martin looked directly at me. "And I remember you." My chest tightened. "What?" He smiled. "I remember you." His voice was steady. "Every day." I couldn't speak. "I remember you showing up when I stopped answering calls." He laughed softly. "I remember you forcing me outside. You needed sunlight. I hated you." "No, you didn't." "No." His smile grew. "I didn't." The room suddenly felt smaller, warmer, dangerously intimate. Martin took a breath. Honestly, his voice became quieter. I think you're the reason I'm still here. My heart physically hurt. Don't. It's true. Martin. It is. His eyes never left mine. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then his phone rang. The spell shattered instantly. He glanced down. Work. With an apologetic expression, he answered. And just like that, the moment was gone. But the feeling remained. All night. All week. Maybe forever. A few days later, something happened that forced me to confront reality. Martin started dating. Not officially, not seriously. But there was someone. A woman from work named Claire. I found out during lunch. The second he mentioned her name, I felt my stomach drop. I hated that reaction. Absolutely hated it. Because Martin deserved happiness. He deserved normal relationships. A future. Everything depression had tried to convince him he couldn't have. So why did hearing about Claire feel like getting punched? The answer was obvious. Because I loved him, and no amount of pretending could change that. The following month was brutal. Martin and Claire spent more time together. Nothing serious, just dates, movies, dinner, normal stuff. Every time he mentioned her, I smiled. I encouraged him. I acted supportive. And every single time, it hurt. Eventually, I started pulling away. Not intentionally. I just needed space, distance, something. Because being around him was becoming impossible. Martin noticed immediately. Of course he did. One evening, he showed up at my apartment without warning. The second I opened the door, he frowned. There you are. I blinked. Hi? Don't hi me. What? Martin folded his arms. You've been avoiding me. No, I haven't. Victor. I sighed. Maybe a little. His expression immediately changed. The frustration disappeared. Now he looked worried. Why? I looked away. Because I couldn't tell him the truth. I couldn't say. Because every time you talk about Claire, it feels like my heart is breaking. So instead, I shrugged. Just busy. Martin stared at me, clearly unconvinced. Then he stepped inside and closed the door behind him. The apartment suddenly felt very small. That's not it. Martin, talk to me. His voice was gentle now, concerned. The same voice I'd heard countless times when he was worried about me. And somehow that made everything worse, because even now, he cared. I took a shaky breath. You're doing better. He frowned. What? You're happy again. His confusion deepened. Isn't that a good thing? Of course it is. Then what's wrong? I laughed bitterly. I don't know. That part was true. I didn't know how to explain that I'd spent months being terrified of losing him. Only to discover I was terrified of losing my place in his life too. Martin was quiet for a long moment. Then he asked something that completely caught me off guard. Do you think I don't need you anymore? My head snapped up. He looked genuinely hurt, and suddenly I realized something. This conversation wasn't only affecting me. Martin had been struggling too. The question hung between us, and for the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. The same fear I'd been carrying for months. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. Martin's question hung in the air. Do you think I don't need you anymore? I stared at him, completely caught off guard, because that wasn't what I expected him to say. Not even close. I expected annoyance. Maybe frustration. I didn't expect hurt. Real hurt. And suddenly I felt awful. Because while I'd been trapped inside my own feelings, I hadn't considered what this looked like from his side. To Martin, I'd simply started disappearing, pulling away, canceling plans, answering texts hours later, creating distance without explanation. No wonder he was upset. No, I finally said. His shoulders relaxed slightly, but not completely. Then what is it? I opened my mouth. Nothing came out, because I was standing on the edge of a cliff, and I could feel it. One wrong sentence and everything could change, maybe forever. I don't know how to explain it. Martin laughed quietly. Try. I looked down, then back at him, then away again. Coward. That's what I was. A complete coward. Because after everything we'd survived together, I still couldn't tell him the truth. The silence stretched. Eventually, Martin sighed. Okay. I looked up. His expression had softened. You don't have to tell me if you're not ready. Relief flooded through me, followed immediately by guilt, because he was giving me an escape, again, just like he'd done 100 times before. Then he stepped closer and said something that completely shattered me. Just don't disappear. His voice was barely above a whisper. I can't lose you too. For a second I forgot how to breathe, because he wasn't joking, wasn't being dramatic. He meant it. Every word. Martin looked away, embarrassed by his own honesty. I know that sounds pathetic. It doesn't. He laughed weakly. A little. No? My voice came out stronger than I expected. It doesn't. Martin looked at me again, and suddenly there it was, that feeling, that tension, the same thing we'd been dancing around for months, maybe longer. Neither of us moved. The distance between us felt impossibly small. Then my phone rang. The timing was so unbelievably awful that I almost laughed. The moment shattered instantly. I stepped back. Martin looked away, and whatever had almost happened disappeared, at least for now. 2 weeks later, Martin broke things off with Claire. Not because of me, at least not as far as I knew. They simply weren't compatible. Wrong timing, different priorities, the usual reasons. Still, when he told me, I hated how relieved I felt. I tried not to show it. Apparently, I failed. Because Martin immediately narrowed his eyes. You're smiling? No, I'm not. You absolutely are. I looked away. Martin started laughing. Oh my God. What? You hated her? I did not. You totally did. I barely knew her. Martin pointed at me. Victor. I couldn't stop smiling anymore. Eventually, I laughed too. And for the first time in months, everything felt easy again. Natural, comfortable, like we'd found our way back to each other. Then spring arrived, and with it came the moment that changed everything. It happened on a Saturday. Martin invited me to a barbecue at his parents' house. Nothing unusual. I'd known his family forever. His mother practically considered me another son. So I showed up expecting a normal afternoon. Instead, I walked directly into a disaster. Not a dramatic one. A family disaster. The worst kind. Martin's uncle had apparently spent the entire day asking why he wasn't dating anyone. Again. Then asking when he planned to get married. Again. Then asking when he'd finally settle down. Again. By sunset, Martin looked exhausted. I found him alone on the back porch, staring into the yard. You okay? He groaned. Define okay. I sat beside him. Tough day. Tough family. I laughed. Fair. For several minutes we sat in comfortable silence. The sounds of conversation drifted through the open windows. Children played somewhere in the distance. The sun slowly disappeared beyond the trees. Then Martin spoke. You know what's funny? What? I used to think depression was the worst thing that ever happened to me. I frowned. Used to? He nodded. Now I think it might have saved me. That caught me completely off guard. What? Martin smiled faintly. I lost almost everything. His eyes remained fixed on the sunset. My job. My confidence. My sense of direction. He paused. But it also forced me to figure out what actually matters. Something about his voice made my pulse quicken. Martin turned toward me. and for some reason I couldn't look away. "What matters?" I asked. His gaze held mine. For a long moment he said nothing. Then, "You." The world stopped, completely stopped. Every sound disappeared, every thought vanished. There was only Martin, looking at me, waiting. My heart hammered so hard I thought he might hear it. Neither of us moved. Then Martin looked down, almost nervous, almost scared, and suddenly I realized something incredible, something impossible. He wasn't the only one afraid. For months I'd assumed I was carrying this alone. But maybe I wasn't. When he looked back up, his eyes were shining with emotion. And before I could stop myself, before fear could win, I reached for his hand. Martin froze. So did I. Neither of us breathed. His fingers slowly tightened around mine. And in that tiny moment, everything changed. The second our hands touched, I knew there was no going back. For months, I'd convinced myself I was imagining things, misreading signs, seeing what I wanted to see. But now, Martin wasn't pulling away. He wasn't confused. He wasn't looking at me like a friend. He was looking at me the same way I'd been looking at him for what felt like forever. His fingers remained wrapped around mine. Neither of us spoke. Neither of us seemed capable of speaking. The silence stretched between us. Heavy, fragile, important. Finally, Martin laughed softly. Not because anything was funny, because he was nervous. And honestly, so was I. I've been trying to figure this out for months. His voice was barely above a whisper. I swallowed. "What?" His eyes met mine. "Us." My heart nearly stopped. Martin shook his head, almost embarrassed. I kept telling myself I was confused. He laughed again. But every time something good happened, his gaze never left mine. "You were the first person I wanted to tell." I couldn't speak. Every word felt lodged in my throat. Martin continued. "When things got bad," his expression softened. "You were the person I wanted beside me." The emotion in his voice was impossible to miss. "And when you started pulling away," his jaw tightened. I thought I was losing my mind. My chest physically hurt because I'd felt exactly the same every single day. I wasn't pulling away because I stopped caring. My voice came out rough. Martin smiled sadly. "I know that now." A breeze passed through the yard. The sky had turned deep orange. The barbecue sounds drifted from inside the house, but none of it felt real anymore. Only this moment. Only him. I was scared. The confession slipped out before I could stop it. Martin's eyes softened immediately. "Of what?" I laughed nervously. "Everything." That earned a smile. "I get that." I took a breath, then another. The truth had been trapped inside me for so long that saying it felt impossible. But I couldn't keep running anymore. Not from him, not from myself. "Martin." "Yeah?" My heart hammered. "I think I've been in love with you for a while." The words finally existed outside my head. Real, terrifying, irreversible. For one awful second, Martin simply stared at me. Then he smiled. The kind of smile that makes you feel like the entire world shifted. "I know." I blinked. "What?" He laughed. "I didn't at first." "Martin, I'm serious." His smile widened. But eventually it became pretty obvious. I groaned and covered my face. "Oh my God. Victor, this is humiliating." Martin laughed harder. "No, it's adorable." "Stop." "Never." For the first time in years, everything felt light, easy, like a weight I'd been carrying had suddenly disappeared. Then Martin's laughter faded. His expression became serious again, and something nervous flickered across his face. "Can I tell you something?" "Anything." He looked down briefly, then back at me. "I think I fell in love with you when things were at their worst." The words hit me like a freight train. Martin took a slow breath. Not immediately. His eyes drifted toward the yard. I don't even know when it happened. He shook his head. I just remember realizing that every time I felt completely hopeless, his voice softened. You were there. My eyes burned, dangerously. I remember sitting alone in that apartment. He smiled sadly, thinking everybody would eventually leave. The old pain was still visible beneath the surface, not gone, just healed. And then you'd show up. I couldn't look away. You never stopped showing up. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. Then Martin laughed quietly. You know what's ridiculous? What? I spent months thinking I was imagining this. I immediately laughed. No way. I did. I literally thought the same thing. Martin stared at me, then burst out laughing. Soon I was laughing too. The absurdity of it all finally hit us. Months of confusion, months of tension, months of pretending. All because neither of us had been brave enough to say what we felt. Eventually, the laughter faded. The silence returned. But this time it felt different. Comfortable. Warm. Martin looked at me. Really looked at me. And I knew, absolutely knew, what was about to happen. His eyes searched mine, almost asking permission. I didn't move away. Neither did he. Slowly, carefully, he leaned closer. My heart felt like it might explode. Years of friendship, months of uncertainty, countless moments that brought us here, all leading to this. Then his forehead rested gently against mine, and we both smiled. Not because we were nervous anymore, but because we finally weren't. For the first time in a very long time, everything felt right. Neither of us moved for several seconds. Martin's forehead rested against mine. The world felt strangely quiet, like everything outside that porch had disappeared. No pressure, no confusion, no uncertainty. Just relief. A huge, overwhelming relief. Because after months of questioning everything, neither of us had to wonder anymore. Martin smiled first, a small smile, the kind he only showed when he was genuinely happy. You have no idea how badly I wanted to do that. I laughed. You should have said something. He immediately pointed at me. Absolutely not. What? You don't get to say that? I couldn't help smiling. Martin shook his head. Victor, I spent months trying to figure out whether you were just being a good friend. I was. Exactly. He laughed. That's the problem. The truth was that he wasn't wrong. Everything I'd done for him came from a place of love, but it also came from friendship. The lines had blurred so completely that even I hadn't recognized it at first. Martin sat back in his chair. For the first time all evening, he looked completely relaxed, lighter, the same way he had looked after finally getting help, like another weight had been lifted. I was terrified. The confession surprised me. Martin usually wasn't the first person to admit fear. I know. No, seriously. He laughed nervously. I thought if I was wrong, I'd ruin everything. I understood that feeling. Better than anyone. Because I'd spent months thinking exactly the same thing. The friendship meant too much. The risk felt too big. But sitting there now, looking at him, I couldn't imagine how close we'd come to missing this. How close we'd come to spending years pretending. Eventually, someone opened the back door. Martin's mother. She stopped immediately, looked at both of us, then smiled. A very knowing smile. Oh, Martin groaned instantly. Mom. What? She looked completely innocent, which made it worse. I see. Mom, she laughed. I'm going back inside. Then she disappeared before either of us could respond. I buried my face in my hands. Martin looked equally horrified. For about 3 seconds. Then we both started laughing. Hard. The kind of laughter that comes after months of tension finally break. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Neither of us told anyone anything directly. But somehow everyone seemed to figure it out anyway. Families are terrifying like that, especially mothers. The following months were surprisingly easy, not because relationships are easy. They're not. But because Martin was still Martin, and I was still me. The foundation had already existed for years. The trust, the friendship, the understanding. Those things didn't need to be built. They were already there. Of course, there were adjustments. The first time we went on an actual date felt ridiculous. We spent half the evening laughing because it felt exactly like every other time we'd hung out. Except now both of us were painfully aware that it was technically a date. At one point, Martin looked across the table and said, "This is weird. Very weird. We've literally done this hundreds of times." "I know. So why does it feel different?" I smiled. "Because you're overthinking." Probably. He was absolutely overthinking. But so was I. The difference was that now we could laugh about it together. A year later, life looked completely different. Martin had been at his new job for almost 12 months. Therapy remained part of his routine. Not because he was struggling. Because it helped. Because healing wasn't something that simply ended one day. It was something you continued choosing. And honestly, I was proud of him. Not because he had beaten depression. Life doesn't work like that. I was proud because he'd fought for himself, even when it felt impossible, even when he believed things would never improve. He kept going. That took courage, far more courage than most people ever realized. One evening we were sitting on the balcony of our apartment. Yes, our apartment. That still made me smile. The city lights stretched below us, the same way they had during countless conversations over the years. Martin rested his head against my shoulder, comfortable, content, happy. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then he suddenly said, "Do you ever think about how close we came to missing this?" I knew exactly what he meant. "Sometimes," he nodded. "I do too." The night air was cool. The city hummed quietly below. Martin intertwined his fingers with mine. A simple gesture, but one I'd never take for granted. Not after everything. Not after watching him fight his way through darkness. Not after nearly losing him. "I love you." The words came easily now. Natural. True. Martin smiled, the same smile that had once seemed impossible during those difficult months. "I love you too, Victor." And as I sat there beside him, looking out over the city we'd both spent years trying to navigate, I realized something. Falling in love with Martin wasn't the most important part of the story. Helping him wasn't either. The most important part was that he stayed, that he asked for help, that he kept going when depression told him not to. Because love didn't save him, not by itself. Friendship didn't save him, not by itself. What saved him was choosing, over and over again, to take one more step forward. And I was simply lucky enough to walk beside him while he did. Sometimes the best love stories don't begin with a spark. Sometimes they begin with showing up, again, and again, and again, until one day you realize you've become each other's home.